Welcome to What's on Your Radar, the 30-minute fast-paced live stream that shares senior cybersecurity professional insight on topics that are intriguing to us. My name is Gerald Dozier, and we are broadcasting from Simply Cyber, the YouTube channel designed to help you make and take a cybersecurity career further, faster. Today, I'm joined by Eric Taylor and Jacob Horn. If you're looking to get in the field or already practicing, I guarantee you there will be value delivered to you in this stream today. Get active in chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all these matters. It's going to be a great show. Now let's get into the stream and find out what's on everybody's radar. What's going on, Eric? What's going on, Jacob? Good to see you guys.
How's it going, man?
What's going on, man?
Nothing. Jacob, being the newcomer, if you will, we don't have a shot of whiskey like DEF CON for you, but we can let you go first.
We're you guys. I thought that was a prereq before we started. So
it's
Friday.
Oh, you already had some, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I took care of that beforehand.
So, Jacob, what's on your radar?
Okay, so very quickly, something called the FAR CUI rule, right? Of course, the compliance guy is going right into acronyms. So the CUI program, people might be familiar with, the Controlled Unclassified Information Program, is the government's attempt to try and control or add security safeguards and assurances to unclassified information. They're usually pretty good about the classified side. And this has been a long-term project that the government has been working on for 10 years. You most likely have heard about the CUI program as handled by the DoD through something called CMMC, which is really DoD's assessment program for the requirements of the overall government-wide CUI program. Now, the interesting part is that the DoD and all of the DoD contractors that are wrestling with the requirements, they're wrestling with 800-171, which is what you mentioned in your course at length, wrestling with CMMC assessments and what's going on. If you zoom out a little bit, you'll realize that that is just one part of the overall CUI strategy of the government. And it actually is made up of three distinct parts. There is the CUI program within the government. There is the set of standards in 800-171 for protecting CUI in government contractor networks, which are private networks that don't belong to the government. The missing piece is in the middle, and that's a FAR rule that says that those requirements are included in contracts. Now, the only reason why this seems like a DoD problem is that DoD has their own supplement to the FAR, which stands for the Federal Acquisition Regulation. So when you go into a federal contract with the government, you get all these contract clauses that you sign and agree to. The DoD, ironically, has actually been years ahead of the rest of the government because they have their version of this clause. The other government agencies, which there are many, many other government agencies, don't have the corresponding FAR CUI clause, which is why you haven't heard about things like CMMC for Department of State or DHS or Department of Commerce or Department of Interior or HHS as a supplement to HIPAA and all of these other things. So the FAR CUI rule was the missing third piece that we've been waiting on now for 6 years. And it is finally right around the corner, like 4 to 6 to 10 weeks away, maybe, is how far away it is. And that is going to cause massive shockwaves for lots and lots of companies because 800-171 is the universal baseline minimum standard for protecting CUI. And this is the part that takes all of the pain that we've been experiencing in the defense space and is going to spread that pain around to everybody else that's downstream from the federal government. So if you are not familiar with 800-171, massive opportunities around the corner because all of the issues implementing and assessing and understanding 800-171 are no longer only a DoD defense space problem. They are a government-wide federal contracting space-wide problem. So it is going, the way I phrase it is the DoD and the industrial base dealing with CMMC is the canary in the coal mine because none of the problems in the defense industrial base are unique to DoD or their contractors. They exist in spades in other agencies and other supply chains downstream from the government. And the FAR CUI rule is the interface between the program and the requirements for everybody else. So that's what I'm looking forward to, because everybody says you're the crazy CMMC guy, and you're like, actually, this is going to affect everybody now.
So, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
So that's really interesting. I didn't know about that. The one thing I knew that CMMC pretty much took an assault, if you will,
Yeah.
because the original CMMC, I think version 1.2 or whatever, before it became 80171, it was really interesting to see where everybody who was self-attesting to 80171 and be like, there's only 13 more controls in CMMC, but it
Yeah.
was too effing hard for everybody to come up to
Yep.
speed. It
Yep.
was like, so you weren't really doing 80171,
Oh, yeah.
were you?
Yeah, and
So
we've got some great videos on our YouTube channel that I think we can maybe link afterwards, Gerald, if you're if the audience, especially if they'll find that helpful. Is the best way I would say to think about CMMC as well as the FAR CUI rule government wide is 800-171 are the requirements. The controls in 800-171 are the requirements. Government wide, CMMC is just DoD's assessment program. Now, that got lost in translation because DoD renamed the controls and they relabeled the controls and they added a bunch of stuff. And, they got a little crazy with everything they were trying to do. They didn't communicate it well. They didn't talk about it well. But within the core of CMMC, you have requirements, you have assessment program. So for all the other agencies, you have the same requirements. So if you know 171, it's universal for anybody. The question will be, as the FAR CUI rule comes out, will the other agencies have their own assessment program, which they could call it anything? They don't have to call it CMMC. They could call it MMCC or CCMM or ABCD or who
ACDC.
cares? It's just the assessment program. Yeah, exactly. It's just the assessment program. The requirements are universal. So that's going to be something to watch because, and here's the advantage, is if you know 800-171, you know the underlying reference layer of controls. So if you go into a HHS contractor who is a HIPAA covered entity and is on contract to the government and they have protected health information, which is a category of CUI, they have the same requirements at a minimum that a DoD contractor has under CMMC, handling ITAR, export control, controlled technical information. Basically, every agency has a bouquet of different CUI types. 171 is the minimum for all of them. So if you know 171, like in Gerald's class, then you can just sort of put on a different agency hat wherever you go, and you head down the the dark path of being a consultant.
So Jacob,
Yeah.
one follow-up question, if you don't mind. Sorry, Joe.
Mhm.
Wouldn't you think that government entities would be required to have more of a stringent security platform than the general 800-171? I
Yeah,
mean,
so it's actually interesting. So the backstory of 800-171, and this is a problem with how DoD has talked about 800-171 and CMMC. What they've done is 171 was never designed to be a model of a complete security program. It was
mhm,
also never designed to be a starting point for implementing a program from scratch. The great irony of CMMC is that when they took 853, the granddaddy catalog
mhm,
of controls, they
yeah,
cut it down and cut it down and cut it down in a process called tailoring. Normally, you cut that down to a minimum standard that covers confidentiality, integrity, and availability. They went one step further and they said, we're only concerned about CUI, so we're going to only tailor the controls to confidentiality. They didn't even try to address the entire triad. So it is a very narrow standard. Now, the way to think about it is it's really more like a privacy standard than it is a risk informed security standard. The DoD being in the position that they are, they're losing data like stuff is walking out the door. They have a serious problem. Nobody has a good security program. 171 was sort of the best starting place. And now the government is trying to reverse engineer a holistic security program from a bad starting point. And that's why there's so much pain and consternation and debate and angry LinkedIn rants about CMMC. But I will say this, the same problems, like I said earlier, exist in all supply chains underneath the federal government for different agencies. And if you think that the other agencies are going to be any better at dealing with this, you haven't been working with the federal government long enough. So if you learn 171, the FAR CUI rule is coming. You will have massive opportunities to be able to help companies because the government is not going to do a very good job at clarifying these requirements.
So before we jump into Eric's radar, Jacob, I just want to understand something. So would it behoove people? Is there going to be like a cottage industry the way that CMMC was kind of about to stand up a cottage industry of businesses needing people who understand 171 basically in order to prepare them for audit, and then also auditors to come in and independently assess 171 compliance? Is that industry coming?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Well then, I'm gonna have to start make a YouTube video about that because
And
that's
there's
huge.
there's like 70 something agencies. DoD is only one of them. And
Mhm.
so you're talking about total addressable market, whether you are a company with these obligations, whether you are a consultant, whether you are a practitioner, whether you are an assessor auditor, doesn't matter what role you would play. It is about to be a much bigger situation than I think people have been led to believe because of the FAR CUI rule. So something massive is about to come around the corner. It's actually pretty remarkable that everybody has sort of forgotten about it, because a few years ago, you couldn't talk about 171 without talking about the FAR CUI rule. But, through the magic of government, it kind of fell through the cracks for a few years.
Yeah, interesting. I might have to make a course on becoming a 171 auditor just to support the amount of jobs that are going to be coming up.
It's going to be a
But
lot. It's going to be a lot. Yeah, we'll talk after, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and really quick before anything, Jacob, are you doing a deeper dive next week on something
Yeah,
similar?
so we're going to have a longer video on this exact subject, understanding the FAR CUI rule, how it relates to 171, how it relates to the overall CUI government-wide program, and then how CMMC and DoD is just one cog in the wheel, if you will, of the overall attempt by the federal government. The CUI program, one way to think about it, CUI program, largest data reform in government history.
Mhm.
And the FAR CUI rule is what bridges the government into private businesses who are contracting with the government. And almost no one is talking about the fact that it's supposed to come out in like a month or two.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, folks, Jacob, while Eric's given his radar, maybe you can drop a link to that event coming up in chat, or give it to me
Yeah,
and I'll drop it
and
in chat.
always check it. We'll drop a link to our YouTube channel. People can check that out. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, and then we'll make sure they get it.
Perfect. Eric, what's on your radar?
Man, this one's gonna get spicy and salty and all the things that are raunchy. I tell you what. So I am very much in digital forensics and incident response, as most of the people who are watching this may be aware of. When it came across my radar this week that actual MSP vendors, manufacturers of software, like making your RMM and your PSA, are now getting into incident response, which is very alarming. So a company called ConnectWise, which everybody here has probably heard of at some point in time, announced that they are doing both ad hoc and on-demand incident response cases. This right here, I mean, if you take a year or 2 years back when you looked at Kaseya and SolarWinds, when they went through their stuff, granted, I'm sure they had their own internal IR teams, but they had to go to a third party to get the forensics done. Now you're going to have somebody who's manufacturing everything, is essentially a paid command and control servers platform, now going to do your IR. So if there was a breach, a compromisation in that software, do you think, and freaking any world that they're going to say, oh yeah, there was a vulnerability in our crap. Sorry. This is something that's really on top of my radar. Like, I don't mind. It's not about the whole competition thing by any means, but I just think that it is a conflict of interest. You know, if you go and get an or get your insurance through State Farm or Farmers or whatever insurance company, do you want your local broker in the back for freaking fixing your fender? No, you want to go to a company who does that work. You don't want just because, you know, we can do this too. It's like many website people who start doing fixing computers because, oh, this looks easy. I mean,
Yeah.
come on. Y'all need to stay in your lane and do what you're doing and stop being, cross-platform.
Yeah. So I agree 100%. Like in previous roles, I've been involved with purchasing cyber insurance, and of course, I actually read the policy, and they're pretty clear in there that, like, if you have an incident, you contact them, and then you have to go through their incident response team, which is not exactly what you're saying right now, Eric, but you don't get to vet, you don't get to clear, you don't get to qualify the incident response team that comes on to your network on your property, right? And
Mhm.
that always bothered me, because it's like, if I'm gonna have due diligence and I'm going to like vet Barricade Cyber Solutions, for example, and I have confidence, and you've done work with us before, so you know our business operations, you know our key, mission critical stuff. I want you to help me recover, not somebody who's getting like, pulled in, and they're going to just come in and spend like one afternoon, figure it out, and then deploy junior analysts in to help out. Like that always bothered me. And to the point that you're talking about now, I honestly think that that's directly a correlation of money. I think if you follow the money, it's like, oh no, like we could totally do this. We could charge double, or we can get a piece of that pie and not have it be affected by some third party. And
Yep.
we are practitioners, so we understand the efficacy of needing that, valuable incident responders, like intelligent incident responders, versus a business that sells, or a 3-doctor healthcare clinic. They don't know the difference between a website developer, a programmer, and a
Right.
network engineer.
Yeah, you're
Mhm.
trying to, you're basically, it would be like your urgent care center down the street being like, yeah, we can do trauma surgery.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure about that? Like, I don't know if I want to do that. Or you're a veterinarian. Like, you can do trauma surgery on like animals. I'm not sure if that's going to work out really well. At a previous position, I had a unique occupation where we were actually consultants that were subsidized through a nationwide program that was sponsored by NIST directly. And it was designed to help companies sort of deal with 800-171 requirements that were very small defense manufacturers. And this came up all the time because almost all of those companies in the defense supply chain and most small companies outsource their services. And then for some reason, insurance, compliance, some standard, a buddy goes out of business. They go, we need IR. They don't really know what that means. They don't know how
Mhm.
to ask a question to understand what it means. They believe their outsourced service provider is a source of authority. And the outsourced service provider, a lot of times, isn't really all that confident or maybe understanding what it means. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. There's a lot of knowledge gaps, I think, on both sides. And like you were saying, Gerald, the economics of the situation, I think, it exacerbates the problem, if you will. It's very difficult for a small business to even know that a dedicated MDR firm exists, let alone justify having a separate one.
Yeah. And as we're talking about it, I know incident response is near and dear to your heart, Eric, which is why you're frustrated by it. But I mean, I've done research into this space. A lot of businesses they're not tech businesses. They're outsourced IT. They outsource IT. Like, that's what they
Mhm.
do. And they assume information security and information technology are this one and the same thing. They think that you're just securing technology. So that's all part of the process, and that's what they've purchased. So
Mhm.
I think it even goes beyond incident response, and it goes
Absolutely.
to security as a solution, basically.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. I mean, a quick example of that is if anybody for whatever reason is listening to DoD webinars recently, really exciting stuff. The
They're so
DoD
hot.
they'll say this. They'll go, "Oh yeah, by the way, we're going to do cybersecurity as a service. And what happens is DoD contractors go, oh, you mean I don't have to do anything? And the government basically says, we're going to just come up with a magical Christmas land solution that meets all of your requirements. And neither of those two things are reasonable positions to take. And it sort of gets out of control. It's throw a dart into an industry and you're going to see this happen. Yeah, Eric, you're totally right, man. I mean, that MSP doing IR is MSP should be doing MSP things. And that's its own can of worms.
Mhm.
IR is difficult and it's a specialized craft that requires real training and real experience. That's not and it's also not anything to trifle with. I mean, we've seen businesses that didn't really connect the dots. Say what you will about compliance doesn't equal security, but they weren't even doing compliance and bad things happened. And, they're not around the way they used to be. I'll put it that way. It's, when you talk about IR, that's like the real deal. It's
Yeah, you
nothing
can do
to
more
sort of-
damage than good if you don't know what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of businesses that I've walked into, and sometimes they'll say, where do we start? Like, you might want to start by figuring out what your IR plan is, because your technical and organizational debts are so high that by the time you get them burned down, we're talking 6, 12, 18 months. What if something happens in the interim? Like, you can't afford to wait to think about this. You might want to asset inventory and who are you going to call when the lights go out kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, Jared, what's on your radar, buddy?
Oh, my radar. Let me tell you guys what's on my radar. So let me share my screen really quick. So some of you may know that this week I had Rob Lee on as my guest on Simply Cyber Live. So this week was all about industrial control systems for me. And one of the things the reason that I dug in this week is because I have worked in information security, much like you two, for a very long time. And my focus has always been on IT. And I almost assumed that I knew OT was special, right? I knew that it affected physical systems and whatever. But I never really realized until this week that OT and industrial control systems, not only are they a different animal altogether, but they have to be treated differently. And I'm not just being flippant like, oh, you can't, whatever, you can't patch it or whatever. Like it's a totally different thing. First of all, when we build information security programs, or when I build programs, there's a playbook you go against, right? You can, whether you're using CIS, NIST-CSF, SOC, ISO, it doesn't matter. You have fundamental pieces and you build on top of them until you have a mature program at a level that's fine for you. And then you monitor it and you do this. Well, with industrial control systems, it's much more about that system continuing to operate and do whatever it is in the physical world that system is supposed to do. And a lot of the research I did this week revealed that, like, and this is why I just brought up this Shields Up from CISA. Look at this right here. This is CISA released Shields Up, right? Like, everybody be on the lookout. We're seeing increased activity from Russia and from other countries, Belarus, etc. Look at this. This is their technical guidance on how to protect yourself. You'll notice here, this is for IT. This, you see, is for ICS and OT only. You'll notice right here, remediate vulnerabilities is absent from this list. Patching in an OT environment, as also noted by this Little Bobby cartoon that Rob Lee does with Jeff Haas, patching things in an OT environment doesn't really reduce risk. It's not about that. And it's just alarming because, patching is like something that you just say, like, you can't patch all the things, but you should be patching as appropriate because it's a great way to reduce risk.
It's an evergreen recommendation, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And this is something that blew my mind as I was doing this research this week. In the ICSOT world, patching is not, if you can do it, but it's not as important. It doesn't have that risk reduction to the point where, like, the federal government isn't even suggesting you do it. And I'll point out another thing that I discovered. One of the reasons that you wouldn't even patch is because sometimes you can't even patch it, right?
Yeah.
Meaning it's not that you can't get on and do it, but sometimes that machine has been qualified by the vendor, right? Like Schneider Electric has said this thing does this just this way. And if you try to put a patch on it, you could screw it all up. You could bring business operations down. Sometimes you need to literally ship
You
the
could bring a
device.
power plant down. Like
Yeah,
you could bring down like a reactor if you're not kidding. The spookiest thing to me about OT security is that the network protocols are different. Like we
Yes.
sort
yeah.
of take for granted that everything is TCP/IP and that it's sort of, you know, the war back in the day it didn't used to be that way. We all converged onto TCP/IP, and you know it's great, it's interoperable, it's wonderful. But when you get into OT networks, there are sometimes unique network protocols to that network, and it's the upside down from Stranger Things. I mean, it's not security, but it is distinctly different and unique.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I see a generic LinkedIn user in chat here. Hopefully, you guys are seeing the chat on the stream the same as we are. I think that that's Don Weber. Don Weber was our guest last week on What's on Your Radar, or 2 weeks ago, or I don't know, 2 weeks ago. And he's an ICS expert. And really that was the beginning of me going down the rabbit hole of industrial control systems. And it really, really just blows my mind as to how little I know about it. And by the way, it really reinforces the idea that, like, I don't care. I've been in the industry 17 years. I've done a lot of stuff. There's still a ton I know nothing about. And I will be the first to admit that industrial control system security is absolutely an area that I am an infant at understanding. I wouldn't even pretend I understand it. Even to the point where, like you said, Jacob, the network communications are totally
Yeah.
different. So
That's not something anybody's had to think about for 20 years on the IT side of things, right?
yeah,
It's crazy. It's
well,
super
and
cool. I mean, one of my favorite, you know, Rob Lee at Dragos, one of my favorite things is that Dragos's tagline is safeguarding civilization, because
Yeah.
when they're doing security, they're like keeping the water running.
or keeping it so it's not poison.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it's serious stuff. It's super cool.
Oh, it is. It's so cool. And then just one more like nugget to tease people in chat and for us to have some discussion if you want, just to round out my research. So uh Rob had mentioned this thing called Pipe Dream, a piece of targeted malware that was written apparently. Oh, by the way, here's another thing I found out. Industrial control system malware, it doesn't happen very often. According to research, there's only been 7 pieces of ICS malware written. Normally, machines ICS is compromised by just using the functionality that exists, right? And there's default passwords, default accounts. You just log in and, like, it's designed to be able to toggle how much lye goes in the water, and like a threat actor just toggles it all the way up. But the system isn't exploited. It's just being used the way it is. So
All
this
the exploits are super elegant. It's amazing.
exactly. So I just wanted to show everyone this. You can get this at Dragos's website. It's their white paper on Pipe Dream. But we kept saying Pipe Dream, Pipe Dream, Pipe Dream. But in reality, Pipe Dream is actually 5 different pieces of malware that they've compartmentalized. One is for getting into IT and then being able to find the OT. One is once you get into that OT, you can see this mouse hole. It's enumerating all the PLCs in there. Then it's getting into the PLCs and actually mucking around with them using the Evil Scholar and Bad Omen malware. So this is a really interesting piece of malware. And for me personally, if you're looking to get a bit more of a appreciation for industrial control systems, like the whole scope of it, like studying this Pipe Dream white paper is actually really nice, because it shows you kind of the security piece of it, like the OT piece of it, and then like what a compromise could look like. So
I have 2 quick reading recommendations on that topic if we got time.
yeah, we got a minute or
So
two.
if people are curious about OT security, I highly recommend that you Google the Norton Stuxnet dossier. So this was a very long analysis conducted by Norton back in the day when Stuxnet was discovered, and their analysis of the Stuxnet tool.
Is it Norton or is it Symantec?
Yeah, oh, Symantec. Sorry, I haven't read it in a while. Symantec. There you go. Symantec Stuxnet dossier. Very, very interesting. Even if you're new to the field, highly recommend that you read it. There might be some stuff that's a little over your head, but that's just the way the field works sometimes. I also recommend a book called The Perfect Weapon by a guy named David Sanger. It's a very good account of how things like Pipe Dream and Stuxnet became the tools of choice between nation states as they play this geopolitical chess game. Very, very easy read. You do that with the Stuxnet dossier and anything from Rob Lee and Dragos, and I think everybody will be well on their way to having a greater appreciation for that subset of cybersecurity.
Is this book right here, is this just a nonfiction account, or is it kind of...
Yeah, so David Sanger is a New York Times reporter. He was Washington White House press corps for a long time.
Okay.
And based off my time in the intelligence community, from my very narrow individual perspective, when I read it, I haven't read anything that was more accurate based off of my experience of the events that were leading up to where we are now, I'll say. It's a good book. Not very long.
Definitely added to my book of stuff to read.
Yeah, it's highly recommended. Yeah, and the dossier is great. I mean, it's pretty awesome in
That's
a
awesome.
terrifying
Yeah, I'll check it out.
OT security way.
It also says here on Amazon that it's going to be made into an HBO documentary soon from an award-winning director. So, you know.
Yeah, if you read Nicole Perlroth's "This Is How They Tell Me the World Will End," think of it as a complimentary book to that one.
Okay. I might have to add that to my reading list as well. All right. So we're right at time. Any final thoughts, guys? Eric, Jacob, before we say goodbye to everyone?
No, hopefully we didn't scare anybody too much or make anybody mad. And hopefully everybody has a good weekend and able to enjoy some family time. That'd be good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think the best thing you said, Gerald, was you've been in the field 17 years and you're still finding new stuff out. So I think that everybody who's drawn to this field gets used to learning constantly and also feeling like they know nothing. So it is a constant journey. So we feel like that even after we've been doing this for 15 or 20 years. If you're new and you're watching this, you're right in the same boat as everybody else. We're all learning together. So
absolutely. All right. So thank you so much to our panel and to our chat for being here today. If you got value out of the show, help a friend out by sharing with your social media network a link to this stream and your honest thoughts about it. You know, good or bad, just honest thoughts. We'd like to reach as many people that can actually benefit from conversations like these, which is why we're doing it. You can go to simplycyber.io/streams to find out about all the upcoming Simply Cyber content. So the morning news briefings, the what's on your radar, the live stream with guest interviews on Thursday. Thanks, everybody, and have a good weekend.
you guys.